Acres is a much heralded scheme of the Department of Agriculture. It replaces various schemes. REPS was one of them, and GLOS as it became, and all of these schemes. Now, there was quite a bit of controversy about it for a number of issues, primarily because it failed to adequately encourage farmers who are farming in marginal areas or areas that were the subject of a designation, and therefore there was a particular environmental sensitivity around the type of agriculture that could be practiced there. Now, one might expect, with such lip service being paid to the environment by the former Taoiseach, current Taoiseach, and to a slightly lesser extent, I suppose, by the current Taoiseach, and with the Green Party in government, one might expect that these areas might be better protected, but in fact they're worse, because any of the areas, for example, the Hen Harrier scheme was a scheme established in the Slievachties, in Clare and other areas which are designated for the protection of the hen harrier. A very important designation. It's Annex 1, bird in decline. Pity, one might say, that the protection doesn't apply in other areas right beside the Slievachties, but that's a slightly different matter. Farmers, in any event, bought into this and carried out the actions that was required of them, and then suddenly it was just pulled with very little forewarning. Likewise, the Burn Life project. I mean, was there a minister? I noticed Minister Creed here. Did you have your photograph taken in the Burn? Because if you didn't, he was certainly unique among ministers that were in the Department of Agriculture for 20 years. There was a procession of them down to the Burn to have their photograph taken with this very successful Burn Life project. And the current incumbent just decides to end it just like that. Now, he did. I raised it with the then Taoiseach, Micheál Martin. He said, well, farmers should not be out of pocket, but they are out of pocket, and they will be out of pocket because the Burn Life scheme was axed. Because if you combine what farmers were getting under the GLOS scheme, or the Hen Harrier scheme, or the GLOS scheme and the Burn Life scheme, it's down. But on top of that, they're not being paid at all because there's a delay now. Usually the Department of Agriculture pay out 50% of a scheme early. And then you can do the calculations thereafter. If someone doesn't fully comply, if there's issues around it, well, you can claw that back from the other 50%. Now, Brendan Smith, who's also a former Minister for Agriculture, sometimes sits behind me. I heard him raise this in the Dáil, that why could 50% of the amount not be paid out? But in fact, none of the amount is to be paid out in the common in the cooperation areas. Now, they're the areas generally which are in a designated area or in an area that's particularly environmentally sensitive. So instead of being rewarded, they're being penalised. And of course, they have costs to meet because farmers run a business. I know very few people in this Dáil run a business. They run a business, they have bills to pay. And they have bills to pay now based on the fact that they were projecting getting that income in now. So I would ask the Minister, I appreciate it's not your department. I do thank you for coming in. It's a pity the Minister has copped out by not coming. But I would look forward to know what the department plans to do.
Thank you, Laskin Corla, and thank you, Deputy McNamara, for giving me the opportunity to update the House as regards the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, and in particular, as you've asked, the scheduling of payments to farmers under the scheme. So ACRES, as we better know it, is the Agri-Environment Climate Measure under Ireland's CAP Strategic Plan 2023 to 2027, and in line with the commitment in the Programme for Government, this flagship environmental scheme, to which the Government has committed over 1.5 billion over its duration, was launched in 2022 and proved to be well received. This was evident from the exceptional demand for entry into the scheme, which demonstrates the interest of farmers to take on actions to address climate, biodiversity and environmental issues. While it had originally been intended that 30,000 farmers would be accepted into the scheme in Tranche 1, as a government, a decision was made that all valid applications submitted for Tranche 1 would be accepted. That meant now that some 46,000 farmers were able to commence their participation in the scheme from the 1st of January 2023, which I'm told is the largest intake into an agri-environment scheme in one tranche. This acceptance of 46,000 applicants into the scheme has now, as you're aware, created significant pressure on the Department of Agriculture's ability to make advance payments to all participants by the year end, as had been planned. The structure of the scheme, which has two approaches, general and cooperation, as well as new features such as results-based scoring, has also contributed to that pressure. So no two contracts are the same, as they can't be comprised of either prescription or results-based actions or a combination of both, with a range of validations to be applied to ensure the correct amount payable is determined. So while officials have been working to expedite payments, it will not be possible with the unprecedented numbers and the complexity of the work required to make an advance payment to all ACRES participants by year end this year. So the schedule is that advance payments will commence on the 18th of December 2023, so just next week, with payments for 2/3 of all acres general participants in the final stages of being processed to go out in that first payment run. While payment for acres participants in the cooperation approach are being progressed, the position is that due to the additional complexity associated with that approach, including the fact that the bulk of payments are results-based, payments for that cohort of participants will begin to issue in February 2024. Everything possible is being done to pay all acres participants as soon as possible. As you appreciate, it's important for budgetary and audit purposes and for farmers themselves that the correct payment is made at the outset. I appreciate the call for a once-off or an interim payment or a 50% payment. The department is of the view that that's not an alternative, that they want to get it right on the first occasion, and that they say it would undermine the integrity of the acres payment scheme, as any such expenditure, they say, would not meet the standards required to access EU funding in accordance with the new performance reporting under obligations under the CAP strategic plan. The government acknowledges the intensive and focused efforts of all involved in the implementation of the scheme, of farmers, of advisors, of acres cooperation project teams, and of course and also the officials who are working across government, who are working now together for the first year of this new scheme. The Department of Agriculture really does acknowledge that farmers were expecting payment before the end of this year, and every effort is being made to maximise the number of acres general applicants that will be paid in the period before Christmas, commencing, as I mentioned, on 18th of December. And efforts will continue to be made to ensure that payments for acres cooperation participants are processed and cleared for payment as quickly as possible in early 2024. I would also note that the Department of Agriculture has paid out €1.3 billion to farmers in CAP payments on schemes such as the BIS, CRIS, Eco Scheme and areas of natural constraints since October. So there is a significant flow of payments going out. The structure of acres is at the forefront of agri-environmental schemes across Europe. It really is an ambitious undertaking to scale up a results-based approach, which before had been used in certain European innovation partnership projects up to a national level. The rollout of a scheme is always challenging at the outset to get it right, but the efforts are being put in place to make sure that it's going to be made on a more timely basis for the future.
Thank you very much. Minister, you've outlined the reasons for the delay, chief among them, or included among them at least, the fact that it's scored unlike the previous measures. But it was the department that determined that there'd be scoring in this. And it was the department set all of the parameters of the scheme, and farmers had a simple choice to make: take it or leave it. And they took it because they said, well, we've nothing to lose by it. But in fact, now what they're losing by it is they have bills coming in, and they have bills coming in specifically to do with compliance with this scheme. Because it's a very expensive scheme to join in terms of the administrative costs. There's a lot of money to be paid to agricultural advisors. And of course, the biggest, I won't call them a firm of agricultural advisors because they're not a firm, they're a semi-state body, is Teagasc. And they've all sent out their bills to farmers. You owe €700 or so because we helped you join this scheme. Now, I appreciate that we have the benefit of being in a state body and our salaries are protected and all the rest of it because we're really part of the state. But you owe us €700 and we want it now, or we're going to start charging interest. And on the other hand, the department, which I think the Minister for Agriculture is a shareholder in Teagasc. Does he not hold the shares on behalf of the state? Certainly all of the shares are held on behalf of the state. They're not paying out the money because they're saying, God, we made it more difficult even for ourselves than we had planned. Now that is outrageous. So what I want to know specifically is, will the Minister for Agriculture talk to Teagasc and tell them, hold off on the bills, hold off on charging interest, hold off on the demand letters until such time as the payments are made under acres? That's a very specific question. I appreciate you're not even in the department that will make the decision, but the reason that this topical issues was set up was to be able to interrogate the department. Now, I see 3 ministers here today. 2 of them are taking questions that have nothing to do with their ministerial responsibility. I congratulate you for being here. I appreciate that you're here.
We're over time.
But we should have an opportunity to ask ministers questions. Yeah, I'm out of time, but the minister is arguably out of order by not being here. But that's all fine with the Count Corla's office.
The ministers could help me gain some time, I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem. Thank you, Deputy McNamara. I appreciate the point that you're raising, but at the end of the day, I've talked about 2/3 of acres general participants being in the final stages of being processed before year end. It is now the 12th or 13th of December, I can't remember which, but 18th of December is next week. It's next week. I will interrogate with the Minister the question otherwise of a state body placing interest on a bill. I will check that. That doesn't seem like a practical thing to do where you're working hand in hand with the department to try and achieve a results-based outcome. I will of course confirm it. I appreciate that the Deputy is better informed on matters of agriculture than I am, but there is a practical logistical point here. But the payments are being processed before year end. There is also payments being processed in February 2024. I see the Deputy is enthusiastic to get back in. I would remind him of course that I appreciate that the Minister isn't here, but he does get an enormous amount of speaking time relative to government backbenchers, and it is a great opportunity the way the Dáil is structured now to enable deputies to have very significant time, whereas government backbenchers government backbenchers have much less time indeed to have opportunities to contribute on any point, including government business. This is the first time that we have delivered such a complex payment structure. Do you think it's right that the department get it right rather than having to come back and forth, which would of course double the administration, double the slowness? It is better to just get it right first time. But I appreciate the points that have been made. There you go, Laskin.
Thank you.